So we'll go over the questions. And we have, how does the description of the narrator's travels in the first paragraph contribute to the story? We can say that he's very familiar with the scenery. This is his hometown. It's his mother's house. He grew up here. We can say that he's very used to things how they are. Maybe even we could characterize him as a nostalgic person, like takes enjoyment out of being in his childhood places, his old flaunting grounds. And then we say, choose a quotation that best illustrates the narrator's attitude towards his mother, and explain why you choose this particular quotation. He says a lot of questionable things towards his mother. I might use this one when he says, I could put my hand on the bell, my little plump mother. He calls her that a lot. And I guess this is the early 1900s, but that's not the nicest thing to say about a woman, you could say. So, the narrator's attitude is described, or we could say the narrator's attitude towards his mother is somewhat condescending, which would be like insulting a little bit. You could say he refers to her as my little plump mother. Several different ways throughout the story, showing that he does not view her as a desirable woman, which I guess, okay, wait, that would be weird to say. Because who does, that would be weird. Anyway, we could say, I guess you could say it where you don't mean it that way. Showing that he lacks respect for her in an authoritarian way. Ooh, because he also, down here, another good quote that we could actually use is when here, he's wondering why Mr. Nixon shows up. And he says, he was my mother's trustee. And then he's saying, I liked him, but he's not happy he is there. He wants to talk to his mother in private. And now he thinks that something has happened with his mother's affairs, which this is actually kind of rude to say. He doesn't care even what happens with his mother's money because he can just afford to pay for her. That is a condescending too. Like, you think you would be maybe concerned about your mother's financial affairs, um, but he's kind of just like boasting or coming off a little arrogant here. You could say the narrator comes off as arrogant here, or in this paragraph, because he is in no way concerned over his mother's financial affairs. That's what that would mean, his mother's affairs. He's no way concerned over his mother's financial affairs. And even boasts that he could afford to keep a wife and his mother, which implies that the women in his life are somewhat like property. If you want to say that, you don't have to read that much into it. You could just say that Philip's being a nice guy. You could say, Philip is nice, this is generous. But in literature, especially if the story was written in 1907, you would want to think about the context of how he's thinking about women. And you could view it outside of the context and just say, this is a nice guy. Because I'm sure there would have been sons that would have said, I don't care what's happening to my mother, let her live in the street. I mean, a lot of bad things happen in life. So you could characterize Philip, or you can characterize him as generous and kind, maybe even too generous and kind. Or you could say, this was kind of insulting. He's calling his mother plump. He's saying she's kettle cattle. and worries about frivolous things. You could view it however you want to interpret it. Describe the narrator's feelings towards Mr. Nixon. Obviously irritated. He can even say a little bratty because he's saying like, Mr. Nixon does come, but not on the first night. Like he wants his mother all to himself. He's being kind of, or I don't know, is he being selfish? You could also say maybe Mr. Nixon was being annoying. We don't know. So now, well, it's however you interpret it. When it says, how did the narrator change from the beginning to the end? All of the things I've said. He was bratty when Mr. Nixon was going to stay. He was irritated. He was thinking that his mother was plump, and we could maybe say she didn't have a personal life. She didn't have, maybe she had friends, but mainly her main concern was Philip. Like that was her whole world. That's what he thought. But then he finds this out and he has his epiphany. You could say we know that he's changed because at first he was totally gung-ho about telling his mother about this engagement. He's going to put it off and let his mother enjoy her giving this news, hence name, news of the engagement. So we could say the narrator definitely is dynamic. We're going to write the narrator can be considered a dynamic character because he undergoes an epiphany in the story's resolution. He says that he had never thought of his mother as a woman with a future. And he also says, I had never realized that she was desirable. I had never realized that she was desirable. And then this point, Philip says it, so we have to say it. He says that he had never, there we go. So that would be his epiphany. He realized his mother could have a life outside of him. Philip obviously went his entire life with his mother never dating after his father died. Philip's father died 25 years ago. So the reader can assume Philip has finally come to the realization that his mother has moved on from being only his caretaker. Something along these lines. Obviously, Philip went his entire life with his mother, never have mother being single. We'll word it like that. Philip obviously went his entire life with his mother being single, his mother being a single widow because his father died 25 years prior. There we go. And now our last question here would be the central idea. So for here, you could just decide what you thought the central idea. Is this about selfish children, never caring about their parents' personal lives? Could we say that sometimes people are too preoccupied with their own lives it could intrude on how they spend time with their family? We could say being overly obsessed with someone can make you not realize your mother is engaged. Whichever you would want to say is the central idea. There's lots of central ideas. And you can interpret the story however you want. And then you can practice this and write it and share it with me, and I can give you some feedback.